You know what's insane about One Piece episode 1121? It's the fact that it never treats Garp and Kuzan's clash like a normal fight between enemies. On paper, that is exactly what it is, a former admiral now standing against the man who trained him, both finally throwing a direct punch at each other. But the anime constantly interrupts that present moment with reminders that for both of them, this fight carries too much history to ever feel simple. Because this fight is secretly about one thing: grief. Before the violence even begins, the episode deliberately takes us somewhere warm. We see Garp in Navy headquarters grabbing Kuzan by the collar, frustrated that his grandson Luffy wants to become a pirate. It is such a classic Garp moment, because even when talking about world-shaking problems, he sounds less like a legendary Marine and more like an exhausted old man whose family refuses to cooperate with government employment. Kuzan answers with complete detachment, saying that it has nothing to do with him, and at the time that sounds natural, almost like he is trying not to get dragged into Garp's family chaos. But now that line lands differently, because Kuzan himself eventually leaves the Marines and stands on the side of pirates. What once sounded distant now feels ironic, because in the end, Garp's family and Kuzan's choices both move in the same direction, away from the system they once belonged to. What follows right after is even smaller but somehow heavier. Garp offers him food. Kuzan initially refuses because he is busy and reminds him that he is an admiral, trying to maintain that formal distance. But the second Garp casually offers tea, that distance disappears almost immediately. Kuzan gives in with that familiar expression that feels half irritation, half affection, the kind of reaction that only happens when someone has known you long enough to ignore your first answer. It is a quiet, ordinary exchange, but placing it right before the fight changes everything, because the episode wants you to remember that before Kuzan became someone standing against Garp, he was someone who could still sit with him like this. That ordinary comfort is exactly what makes the later violence feel irreversible, and when the fight finally reaches its most important moment, the anime makes sure that neither of them sees only the person standing in front of them now. As Garp moves toward Kuzan, his eyes briefly reflect not just the man Kuzan became, but the younger version of him too. First the student who came looking for strength, then the admiral shaped by years of training under him. For a split second, Kuzan is every stage of the person Garp watched grow stronger. Kuzan receives the same treatment. When he looks at Garp, what appears in his eyes is not simply the current vice admiral in battle, but the younger Garp whose presence once represented strength, discipline, and the impossible standard he spent years trying to reach. That is why even before the punch lands, the fight already feels emotionally divided. Their bodies are fully in the present, but the anime keeps forcing their history into the frame. It does that even earlier, in one of the most subtle moments of the episode. When Kuzan runs toward Garp, the camera lowers just enough to focus on his shadow, and for a brief instant that shadow mirrors the same posture he had during training under Garp, when he was still punching ships and training beside him. It is such a quick visual that it can disappear on first watch, but once you notice it, the movement changes meaning. Kuzan is physically charging forward, yet the image quietly pulls him backward, as if even his body cannot move toward this fight without carrying traces of where that strength came from. The episode continues that same idea when it briefly cuts to Garp talking about Dragon becoming a revolutionary. It appears in the middle of a fight that should have no reason to pause for old family conversations, which is exactly why it matters. It places Kuzan inside the same larger pattern that has followed Garp his entire life. People close to him repeatedly choosing paths outside the institution he represents. First his son, then his grandson, and now the student he personally helped shape. Kuzan standing there as part of Blackbeard Pirates suddenly feels less like a random betrayal and more like another chapter in that same recurring loss. The anime even visualizes that shift directly. For a moment, the Marine symbol forms around Kuzan like mist, fragile and fading, before it gives way to Blackbeard's Jolly Roger. It is one of the clearest symbolic images in the episode because it shows that Kuzan's identity did not simply disappear when he left the Marines. It had to dissolve first. Even then, it fades, almost reluctantly, before another symbol replaces it. When Kuzan says that Garp trained a troublesome enemy, the line sounds harsh on the surface, but paired with that image, it feels less like pride and more like acknowledgement that the strength Garp gave him is exactly what now makes this confrontation possible. Then the punch lands, and the anime turns that impact into something much more than physical force. It fills the impact frames with younger versions of both of them, moving through different stages of their lives as if years are compressed into that single hit. One frame says almost everything without dialogue. Young Kuzan looks afraid, not shocked, not angry, just afraid. It is brief, but enough to suggest that beneath everything else, part of him still does not want this moment to exist. Opposite him, young Garp is smiling, not mocking him, not challenging him, but smiling with the kind of expression that feels strangely proud, as if even here some part of him still sees the student whose hands he helped harden rather than just the opponent in front of him. That is why the reflections breaking right after matter so much. When their punches connect, those younger images shatter like glass. The anime could have ended the exchange with pure impact, but instead it chooses fracture. This is the visual representation of everything the fight kept bringing back until that point. And then episode 122 gives the final emotional answer. Kuzan stabs Garp through the chest, and even then Garp is still smiling, still laughing through blood, refusing to let the moment become tragic on anyone else's turn. Kuzan, meanwhile, is left freezing his own tears. It is one of the most telling images the anime gives him, because even after changing sides, even after fighting as an enemy, the emotion that follows is something he still cannot let exist naturally. And then episode 122 gives the final emotional answer. Kuzan stabs Garp through the chest, and even then Garp is still smiling, still laughing through blood, refusing to let the moment become tragic on anyone else's turn. Kuzan, meanwhile, is left freezing his own tears. It is one of the most telling images the anime gives him, because even after changing sides, even after fighting as an enemy, the emotion that follows is something he still cannot let exist naturally. So it freezes before it can fully fall, because in the end, what hurts most about this fight is not that teacher and student became enemies, it is that even as enemies, neither of them could fully erase what came before.